There is a device on the mast of the Soulmate. It is called Starlink. And here is the thing about Starlink that has not been explained clearly enough yet. It does not just give you internet on a boat. It logs every single device that connects to it, phones, tablets, watches, anything with Bluetooth or Wi-Fi in range. Starlink keeps a record, timestamp, duration, device identifier. When you got close enough to the Soulmate to connect, Starlink knew. And Brian said he was never close enough to connect, and Brian said he was never close enough. He said Lynette never made it to the Soulmate either. He said she fell from the back of the dinghy, somewhere in the channel, somewhere between Hopetown and Elbow Cay, in the water. Gone. He says they were on their way to the Soulmate, but never made it. He says she was gone before they got anywhere near the boat. He has said this to the Royal Bahamas Police Force, to Fire and Rescue, to Darlene, to Blaine Stevenson on a recorded call, to the media multiple times, to multiple people. That is his account, that is the story he told. And that is the story that every piece of data on the Soulmate is now being tested against. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She was from Onstead, Michigan. She sold everything. The house, the career, the stability she had spent years building, to live on the water with Brian. 4 years on a 46-foot sailboat named Soulmate, sea turtles in the shallows of the Abaco Islands, sunsets from the deck, cinnamon rolls from a solar oven. She called the ocean her happy place. Her last Instagram caption said not going anywhere for a while. She has been missing since April 4th, 2026. No charges have been filed. The Soulmate is in federal custody at Fort Pierce Coast Guard Station behind crime scene tape, and the investigation, led by CGS, is active and ongoing. And that is where the picture starts to shift. Ashley Banfield has been covering this case since the beginning on her Drop Dead Serious podcast. Her sourcing inside this investigation is the best of anyone in public media, and in her most recent episode, she said something specific that did not get the attention it deserved. She said her sources told her things were going very, very well. And then she said this: the things they were hoping were on board were on board. That is not a general statement. That is a source telling a named journalist specifically that investigators went looking for specific things and found them. And one of the things she named very specifically was the Starlink. She said it out loud. Because Starlink is something you connect to when you get close to it. And if Brian and Lynette connected with their phones or their watches as they approached that boat, Starlink would have that history. Ashley Banfield, Drop Dead Serious, on the record. And here is what makes that matter. Starlink is a satellite internet system. Brian was a self-described tech enthusiast. Ashley describes him as a tech geek who geeked out wiring the Soulmate's systems together. The Starlink was part of that network. And here is what most people do not think about. It does not just give you internet on a boat. It creates a Wi-Fi bubble around the vessel. Every device that has ever connected to it, every phone, every tablet, every smartwatch, reconnects automatically the moment it comes within range. No action required. No password. No searching for the network. If your device has connected before, it reconnects. And that reconnection is logged with a timestamp, which means if the dinghy with Brian and Lynette got close enough to the Soulmate on the night of April 4th for any paired device to reconnect, that event is in the log. Brian says they never got close enough. He says she was gone before they got anywhere near the boat. If the Starlink log shows a device connecting that night, it directly contradicts his account. There is no ambiguous reading of what that timestamp shows. If this case matters to you, and if you have watched this far, it does. Share this video. Lynette Hooker has been missing since April 4th, and the more people who know what is happening in this investigation, the harder it becomes for the truth to stay buried. Like this video. Share it. Subscribe to Justice Over Everything, so you are here when those answers surface. This case demands attention. Uncover the truth. Demand justice. And it does not stop there. Brian was making maps. Not hand-drawn maps. Not a sketch on a napkin. AI-generated maps. Specific, rendered, visual maps showing his alleged drift route across the Sea of Abaco. He sent them to Jim Todd. He sent them to others. They appear in the text record. And Ashley found out what AI he was using. Gemini. Google's Gemini. The timestamp of when he created those maps is in the Gemini history. Every query he made on that account is in the Gemini history. What he asked for, what he searched, what he built. And investigators who have the right paperwork can access all of it. When was he using Gemini? That is the question Ashley is asking publicly. Because if Brian was making queries on that account on the night of April 4th, while Lynette was supposedly still in the water in the channel, that is a different category of evidence than anything else we have discussed. That is the kind of finding that changes a case. And that connects directly to something investigators found. The security guard. His name is Edward Smith. He works overnight at Marsh Harbor Boatyard. The boatyard that, according to Jim Todd, was 150 yards north of where Brian came ashore. Brightly lit, visible from the water. The obvious destination for anyone arriving by sea in the early hours of April 5th. Fox News Digital found Edward Smith. They talked to him. The transcript of that conversation exists in the public record. And what Edward Smith says Brian told him creates contradictions that have not received nearly enough examination. Because there is another layer to this. Brian told Edward Smith that Lynette fell overboard at around 7 in the evening. 7, not 7:30, not 8:70. Sunset on April 4th in the Abaco Islands was approximately 7:50 p.m. At 7 p.m., there is still full daylight in the Bahamas. The sun is still above the horizon. You can see everything clearly. Brian told Fire and Rescue it was too dark to see her. He told Darlene it was dark. But he told Edward Smith it happened at 7, full daylight. You cannot tell the security guard it happened at 7 and tell Fire and Rescue it was too dark to see her. Both of those things cannot be true at the same time. But that is not the only thing. Brian told Edward Smith that Lynette was swimming toward Hopetown. Hopetown is north. The soulmate. Their boat, the destination they were supposedly heading toward when Lynette fell in, was to the south. Elbow Cay was to the south. But Brian told the security guard she was swimming north. He told Fire and Rescue she was swimming toward the boat, south. He told someone else he thought she was swimming toward shore. 3 people, 3 different directions, none of them the same. That is on the record, and what came next made it worse. Lynette's dry bag was green, confirmed publicly by multiple people who knew them and by the family. Green. Brian's bag, the one he arrived at the boatyard with, was yellow. And when Brian told Edward Smith that Lynette was swimming toward Hopetown with a yellow bag, he described the wrong color and the wrong direction. Simultaneously. In the same sentence. That is not a minor inconsistency. That is a description of a different event than the one he told everyone else about. Ashley Banfield went through all of this publicly. She compared what Brian told Edward Smith with what he told Fire and Rescue, with what he told Darlene, with what he told investigators. And the picture that emerges is not one of a grieving man whose memory is imperfect under trauma. It is a picture of multiple separate versions of the same night that do not connect to each other, which brings us to something else, the scuba gear. On April 2nd, 2 days before Lynette disappeared, Brian and Lynette were at Great Guana Cay. Confirmed. Their AIS record shows it. Their social media documented it. They filled their scuba tanks, both tanks, full. On April 3rd, no diving. On April 4th, the day Lynette disappeared, they spent the day at Tahiti Beach and then at the Abaco Inn. No diving. which means those scuba tanks should still be full when investigators open the Soulmate at Fort Pierce. Ashley is asking specifically whether they are. Whether all the weights in Lynette's weight distribution belt are still there. Whether the gear tells the story of whether anyone used it between April 2nd and when the Soulmate was seized. Tanks full on April 2nd. No diving on April 3rd or 4th. The log either shows full tanks or it does not, which is where this case gets harder to explain. Brian told a story. He told it to the Royal Bahamas Police Force, to Fire and Rescue, to Darlene, to Blaine Stevenson on a recorded call, to the boatyard security guard, to the media, multiple times, to multiple people. And the reason every detail of that story matters, the reason the Starlink log matters, the Gemini history matters, Edward Smith's account matters, the scuba tanks matter, is because every single piece of data on the Soulmate is now being tested against that story, not against a theory, against his own words. Investigators are not guessing at what Brian said. He said it in a 40-minute recorded phone call verified by CBS News, in a conversation with the boatyard security guard documented by Fox News Digital. Brian gave them the story, and now the Soulmate is in Fort Pierce. The Starlink log, the Gemini history, the AIS record, the navigation electronics, the solar array data, all of it being compared against what he said. Ashley confirmed it. The things they were hoping were on board were on board. Sources close to the investigation are not saying this is over. They are saying the opposite. Lynette Hooker deserves answers. Her family deserves answers. Share this video and keep this investigation in the public eye. The more people who know what is on that boat and what investigators are finding, the harder it becomes for the truth to stay buried. Like this video. Share it. Subscribe to Justice Over Everything. This case demands attention. Uncover the truth. Demand justice. And then there is this. Ashley Banfield went to Marsh Harbor in person. She went to the actual spot where Brian came ashore. She looked at the terrain. The boatyard was 150 yards away, lit up like a stadium, visible from the water, the obvious destination for anyone arriving by sea, and the alternative that Brian's account requires, walking through thick scrub bush, across a water inlet, through jungle in the dark, in flip-flops. She used a phrase I want to note, a pile of bad facts, the accumulating weight of everything that does not fit. The weather that night was calm and lovely. The AIS went offline at 9:29 p.m. A witness heard a noise from the direction of the Soulmate at 9:30. The flare that went horizontal. The boatyard he did not go to. The woman swimming north when the boat was south. The yellow bag that should have been green. The 7 that should have been dark. A pile of bad facts. And now the Starlink that logged every connection. The Gemini account that recorded every query. The scuba tanks that should tell investigators exactly whether anyone dove between April 2nd and when the Soulmate was seized. And that is only part of what investigators reportedly found. But I keep coming back to something that exists outside all of that. Outside the data and the timestamps and the evidence bags. Lynette bought Brian healing oil for his toenail fungus. Ashley mentioned it this week. Brian had a nail fungus that made his nails look dark and dirty, and Lynette had bought him something called Benjamin's healing oil to try to help him fix it. That is a wife. That is a specific mundane act of care. Not flowers, not a grand gesture. A bottle of something she noticed he needed and quietly did something about because she loved him. She sold a house and a career to live on a boat with this man. She documented sea turtles and sunsets and cinnamon rolls and tried to get him to take his healing oil. She had a plane ticket booked for March 11th, 2026. She planned it. Then she did not use it. 24 days later she was gone, and the Soulmate is in Fort Pierce behind crime scene tape, with a Starlink on the mast that logged every connection. A Gemini account that recorded every query, and scuba tanks that may or may not tell investigators something important about the days leading up to April 4th. Ashley Banfield says what investigators were hoping to find was there, and here is what makes that matter. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She was from Onstead, Michigan. She tried to help her husband with his toenail fungus. She called the ocean her happy place, and there is a device on the mast of the Soulmate that recorded every connection made by every device that came close enough to connect. Brian said he was never close enough. The Starlink log either confirms that or it does not, and federal investigators in Fort Pierce, Florida, already know which one it is. They already know. If you have any information about the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, anything at all, contact CGS through the TIPS app, fully anonymous, iOS and Android. Link in the description. The Royal Bahamas Police Force investigation also remains active. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His attorneys state he categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing, and Lynette Hooker has been missing since April 4th, 2026. Subscribe to Justice Over Everything, because when this investigation moves, when those logs and records and timestamps produce something investigators are ready to act on, you need to be here. This case demands attention. Uncover the truth. Demand justice.